Hi, I'm Jaynie Morris, CEO and founder of Sheroes Unlimited, and welcome to another episode of Sheroes Unlimited Behind the Book, where each time we sit down with an author that has either recently launched a book or a new book, or perhaps an author that has got a book that we have has come across our desk, and our team have gone, hey, you know what, Jaynie, we need to find out a bit more about this author. And today's episode is no exception. We're pretty excited. I'm definitely excited about having our very special guest today on Sheroes Unlimited Behind the Book for several reasons, not least of which is that her latest book, and she has written so many, but her latest one only came out yesterday. So we're really excited to be amongst, the first to actually sit down and have a chat with her. Fiona McIntosh is an internationally best-selling author. And whilst her beginnings in her career started out in a little bit of a different vein, life just turned around and ended up making her a full-time novelist. And we're absolutely delighted that she is. She built a career in PR and marketing before becoming a full-time novelist, roaming the world for her novels. And we're going to talk about that roaming the world and how that fits in with how she writes her books. Her latest book is The Spy's Wife. Fiona, welcome to Sheroes Unlimited Behind the Book.
Jaynie, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
Now, we're going to talk about your new book, but before we do, obviously, our podcast is all about getting behind the book and digging a little deeper so that our listeners can get a bit of more of a feel of our authors. So let's have a bit of a chat about Fiona before you became a novelist. Talk to us about all of that and then what led to you actually writing.
Well, I hail from England, and I was never a small town girl. I always wanted to hit the big stage. So as soon as I could, I went to London, and then that got me my traveling boots, and I decided, let's explore the world, and off I went and ended up in Australia, but never got any further. Fell in love, and I married a journalist, and he's got ink in his veins. And so although I came from a marketing and PR background and still use it to this day, we both got into travel publishing, and that meant I could roam the world and see all corners of it for about, I don't know, nearly 2 decades. And then midlife crisis hit, turning 40. I didn't want to just be known as Ian's wife or Rules and Jack's mother. I wanted to leave my mark on the world, and there were all these options, but I decided writing a book was the biggest challenge I could face. And I'd forgotten that I'd always wanted to do that. My mother reminds me at 5, I used to talk about writing books anyway. So I thought, well, don't have regrets. So I went to a course for 1 week, did that course, came home, wrote a story, sent it off to the world's biggest publisher, and I was a bit shocked. The fairy tale came true, and they said, can you write 3 of these? And so I was off and going, and I was suddenly this author overnight. It really was the fairy tale. And I know there are people out there who will hate me for that story, but I didn't bleed for my craft, but I did have to do a very public apprenticeship. So every book that I learned on, was me out there, very naked on bookshelves. And people don't, pull their punches when they want to review a story. So I had to do that very public growing up. And now I feel at my 40th book, I know what I'm doing.
Well, let's talk about that then. When you wrote your very first story and sent it off to the publisher, what was the inspiration behind that first story? You did the course, you knew that you wanted to make your mark in as far as writing was concerned. What was the inspiration behind that first story for you then?
Yes. Well, interestingly, and I give out the same advice now because I host masterclasses, but the maestro behind me was Bryce Courtney, and I did 5 days with Bryce in Tasmania on his masterclass, and I went there with a view to writing historical fiction. But he said to me, you are nowhere near ready. He said, you're a writer. I've got no doubt you're going to go all the way. In fact, you're the one in the room I reckon is going to be a bestseller before she knows it. But he said, you're not going to do it on historical fiction. Don't do it. You will come unstuck. And I didn't really understand, but he said, you'll know when you're ready to write that. So for now, write what you know, which is the most appalling piece of advice, and yet the best piece of advice that anyone could give you. So I took that to mean write what I was reading, write where I was familiar. And for me, that was speculative fiction. I loved medieval fantasy. I was devouring it at the time. And so I wrote that. I wrote a story that was bubbling inside me. And I was shocked to get this 3-book deal straight away, you know. So his advice was on the money, you know. It was nothing to do with him. It was a completely different publisher. And anyway, so I did that for 10 years. So I wrote about 14 big books before I thought, I know what he means now. I've done my apprenticeship. I know how to bolt together a big story. And I realized that for historical fiction, you have to do research. I mean, oodles of research. And so that's what he was getting to. And he needed me to realize that for myself. So it was 10 years before I settled down to write historical fiction. And it demands its pound of flesh because each book takes about 2 years, you see. So it's a big undertaking. And he was right.
And so with that research, because we do know that you know, with yourself, Fiona, that as you say, you know, each book takes about 2 years in regards to research is concerned, but also you, up until COVID, I guess, really, you've always had a passion to actually, wherever your characters are placed in your book, that you actually immerse yourself in those locations as well. How did you find that? And with seeing I've mentioned COVID, how do you find it now with COVID and those restrictions to you from a professional standpoint?
Well, you see, coming out of a travel background, for me, travel was second nature. And so when I started to write, I always wanted to write books that were set on the other side of the world. I also feel that because I was born on the other side of the world, I've got the Northern Hemisphere in my DNA, you know. My birthday's in March. I'm a creature of winter, and yet it's always stinking hot in this country in March. So it always feels a bit weird to me. Still, after 4 decades, it feels weird that my birthday is in a very hot month when I know it should be cold. Anyway, I digress. So travel was in my blood, and I started to always set my stories in far-flung places. And I wasn't frightened to set them in India or Morocco or Istanbul. I've been to all those places, and it didn't worry me to get on a plane and go there and settle down and learn about the region and learn about the times and everything, the food, the culture, everything, all the background. So that became my shtick, you could say. It became the signature of my storytelling, that you would sit in your armchair, but I was going to armchair travel you to these amazing romantic places that you may have visited. And so it pinged all those memories, or you may sort of yearn to go to these places, or it may make you want to go to these places. So I felt that was my little bag. And of course, right up until this story, The Spy's Wife, I was traveling for it. But as of March 2020, wings were firmly clipped. And so I had to face the greatest demon of all for me, which was to sit down and write a story, which I've been doing all of this year, that is locally based, it's domestic, it's Australian. I feel like such an imposter, but you know, The Spy's Wife, I was fortunate that all those locations, Munich, Berlin, you know, Paris, Yorkshire, London, I even went to Nuremberg in case we needed it, and I even went to Lithuania in case I needed to take it into further east, you know. I was able to gather that all up, and I was able to scuttle home in March 2020 as they closed the doors. And that was me done. And I haven't been anywhere since. So yeah, it's frustrating, but I'm ready to go. I've got several trips planned for next year, with fingers crossed that I can get over there, because I've got big stories to write, you know. So it has changed me, and it's changed what I'm writing. The next 2 books that you see from me will be, next 3 books will be domestically based because of COVID. So, and that's a good thing because it throws down challenges. And I think a lot of my readers are thrilled that I'm writing an Australian story, you know, all Australian.
Absolutely, and especially because you are much loved around the world with every book that you've written thus far. And as you say, you know, over 40 books. I would suggest then that having that local, you know, the Australian flavour as base for your next few books, then your audience that don't live in Australia, then you're taking them on a trip in our country as well anyway. So, you know, from that perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it just yes, it opens up Australia to a new market as well. And we do have some interesting locations. We've got the Flinders Ranges and all of that coming, so it's very majestic, very beautiful. But in the meantime, The Spy's Wife was wonderful because it begins in a sort of sleepy backwater and ends up on the big stage, you know, or right through sort of all these cities in Germany. And it just gets bigger and bigger before it closes down again back to that sleepy backwater. So it's fun. It's fun.
So let's dive into The Spy's Wife then. So talk to us about the character Evie, because I've haven't read the whole book because it is as per usual with any Fiona McIntosh book, it is at least, I'm just looking at it now, it's at least 400 pages.
At least.
I'm a speed reader, but I didn't manage to get all the way through before we got to the opportunity to sit down today. However, in what I have read so far, Evie has caught me straight up. So talk to us about her as a character first, and what was the process for you to bring her to life?
Look, all of my women in my stories, the heroines that sort of stomp through my pages, they're all women with agency. That's what I like. I like a woman who's pushing back against the norms, who's not being told to sit in the corner, and as they were in these times. You know, we're in the middle of the 1930s here, and you know, men were back from war and they claimed back their jobs, and the women who'd had such freedom during World War I and proved themselves to be more than capable were suddenly being told, you know, go back to being the wife and the mother and the you know, primary school teachers and all this sort of thing. So that's where we find Evie. She's never set foot out of Yorkshire. She's a quiet railway station master's daughter in a branch line in North Yorkshire on the moors. So you couldn't get more, you know, quiet and peaceful. And still she's trying to flex her sort of, not muscle, but her ability to be more. She's basically running the station for her father, but she's also decided, well, I'm going to run a kiosk as well. I'm going to bake and I'm going to get some money into our coffers by selling teas and coffees. This wasn't normal at that stage on branch lines. So she is a girl who's got ambition, but she doesn't know it in herself. And I don't plan my story, so I had no idea where Evie was going to go with this story, except it gave me quite a shock when she does start to take control of the story. And there are plenty of men in this story trying to put her down and put her back in her place. And I love that she plays them at their own game, particularly the men in London, the mandarins of Whitehall. You know, I don't know if you've got to that point yet, but she is just magnificent in that moment where she turns everything on its head, tricks them, sort of, you know, throws everything back at them. That's when she feels her power come in, and she decides, right, from now on, I'm calling the shots. I'm going to do this, and this is how it's going to be. And I love that about her. I love that she took control of an otherwise uncontrolled situation where the man that she loves was under threat, and everything that she thought was going to happen in her life was now turned on its head, and she decides the path forward and no one's going to stop her. And then she's put into incredible situations in this story. She has no business being where she is. She's in a situation of, without wanting to ruin anything, where she can actually inform London on what is happening in Germany in the build up to war. No one believes that there would be a Second World War. Only the reader knows another war is coming. The cast doesn't know, but they suspect things are happening in Germany. And she's there on site and able to find out all sorts of information for Whitehall. She's brilliant. It's a brilliant role for a woman. Brilliant, brilliant. I love it. I love that and then she straps on her James Bond further in the story, and it becomes this huge adventure, and she's really fearless, and I love that about her. And it's fear that's driving that courage, and she finds it, at the right moment. So she built herself. I claim no part in that, really.
Did you find in your research, because this is an era in particular that that has captured the attention of generations since, as a result, because of the emergence of stories like this that have happened behind the curtains and what have you. So in your research, did you find that this type of thing, in regards to what she was doing, as far as the information feeding and what have you back to England, was happening a lot? I mean, women really played it's been coming out, women really played quite a big role like that, didn't they? And did that come out in your research?
Yeah, look, I know for my first book, The Lavender Keeper, that touched on this, that women were being recruited as spies, but it happened a bit later than this era. We stay in the era of 1936 for The Spy's Wife. By around 1939, 1940, they were actively recruiting women, because women could actually pass under the noses of a lot of people, because you don't expect a woman to be a spy. You don't expect a woman to be gathering information for another country. Of course, now we're suspicious of everyone, but back in those days, a woman was a mother or somebody's wife, or she was a secretary at best, and she didn't have a brain, and she didn't think for herself. She did what her husband told her, all of this. So they don't for a moment think that a woman would be a spy, and yet women make great spies, because we are naturally, dare I say, cunning. We are capable of holding onto doing several things at once and holding on to a lot of information at once. If you think of being a mother, all that we do in a single day, and we have to be across in a single day, it makes us very good material to be spies. And so this is what Evie is demonstrating. And yes, I did find that in my research. Spying is one of the oldest arts. It goes back to the ancient Greeks and even further. So there's nothing new about what she's doing. But what I found interesting is I didn't realize there were so many German spies in Britain in the mid-30s. And so I wanted to play with that and then turn it on its head and send a spy into Germany, which is what this story is all about.
It's interesting. One of our Sheroes Unlimited members who read part of the book for me the other day as well. Well, actually, she's read 3/4 of it. But one of the things one of the things that she said to me, Fiona, which I thought was really interesting, was, and she was referring to Evie as well, being the lead character in the story. She said, this book is of the 1930s, yet it could be a story of a woman today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great compliment as well.
Yeah, that is a great compliment. And I know I've said in other interviews, this is a story for today. It is on many levels, the level that your colleague has suggested, but also I think because of what's happening in the world with all this bleakness, I was determined when I sat down to write it through the COVID year of 2020 that I wasn't going to move into wartime. So I wanted to keep it in that mid-1930s and keep the suspense, the actual rise of Nazism, rather than dealing with the fallout of Nazism. I wanted to watch it happening and begin to explain to people how it happened, because that's one of the big questions I always have. How did this happen? How did we allow, as a world, and how did the Germans, such a liberal people, allow this one particular party to rise to the top and this one man to control them in the way that he did. And so I needed to do that sort of research, and it was very intriguing to find out how women were complicit in the whole thing. There were so many German women very happy with the situation, you know, and being told we must wear only German made clothes because we don't want them touched by other people. They have to, you know, there's so many layers to this story. And I think Evie is a woman of today because she is fighting back and saying everything about this is wrong, everything, and we have to stop it, you know. I mean, we rolled into World War II, but even so, it is a story for today, and that's a fine compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Before we let you go, Fiona, because I know that everybody's demanding your time at the moment, in particular on this. However, one of the questions that I was given to ask you is, what outside of, because you are because like it's a full-time job for you writing, yeah, so outside of that, what inspires you personally on a day-to-day basis?
Look, I love other creative outputs. I don't want to just be the writer, you know, and you do hear stories in your head all the time. I'm lost in my imagination all the time, and I'm always working on 3 books at once, not writing them. So I might be, right now I'm promoting one, but I'm editing next year's book, I'm researching the new crime, and I'm getting myself organized to write the new historical for 2023. So yes, it's full time, and so you could get lost in that. So one of the things I do is host a masterclass to help other young writers and other writers who just want to be me, who want to do what I do. And sometimes all they need is just the right person walking into their life at the right time to say, you know, you can do this. Let me tell you how it happened for me. So I spend a lot of time on masterclass. And I find them very inspiring, talking to youngsters and almost being envious that they're starting so young. You know, I wish I'd started so much younger, but you know, I want them to benefit from what I've learned, rather than don't fall into the potholes that I had to fall into. Let me save you that trouble, and let's fast track you and get you to here. So the masterclass community is now 400. I'm very busy with all of them, helping getting them pitched into, you know, onto desks of publishers. And we've got loads working with the top publishers around the world right now. We've got so many masterclasses. I could reel off names to you and you'd think, really, that's a masterclass? Anyway, the other thing I do is I bake, because I think when you're baking, it's almost like Zen. You're really disconnected from everything, and you're just measuring and stirring and, you know, thinking about this recipe and then feeling tense. Is it going to bake how I want it to? And then you get this marvelous reward. So baking and cooking for me is it's a good distraction. I've taken up, you know, crayon sort of pastel artwork and quite enjoying that. My next thing is to do some pottery. I'm not sure if my arthritic fingers are up to it, but I'm gonna have a go, because I love doing that sort of thing. I need something at the end of it. I'm somebody who needs a reward. So the book or the pot or the cake, I'm not very good at other things that, you know, running, where you don't get any reward at the end of it. No one's putting a medal around your neck for, you know, running 5 kilometers or whatever. So yeah, I find, and I've got family, you know, I've got family, and they soak up a lot of time too.
So if you had an 8-year-old Fiona in front of you right now, what advice would you give her?
Oh gosh, I would say, you know, what every mother of today would say, which is go for it. Anything you want to do, you can do. Because I've proven to myself, my mother told me that when I was 5, I asked for silence in the room because I had a very big, important announcement to make. And I told everyone I was going to write a book when I was grown up. And I have no memory of this. I keep wondering, are you telling fibs? And mum's told the story to so many people that I'm sure it's true. And I was quite precocious as a youngster. So I think I would say that, obviously, I've lived out the dream that I set for myself. I think dreams are there to be, you've got to daydream. I think it's really important, and you shouldn't get lost in your life and your responsibilities. And the one other thing I'd say is, you know, being selfish now and then is a good thing, because I think if you have to be selfish now and then, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. It's very good to sort of indulge yourself in a few things, whether that's a hobby or a treat or just time away from family. You know, I think it's very important to take that selfish time, and I do to this day. And I think a happy person, I'm a happy wife, happy mum, happy writer. So everybody else around me is happy because I'm happy, if you get my drift. I do believe that you've got to take that selfish time. Women are very bad at taking selfish time, you know.
Yes, they are.
You know, we put ourselves last always. And so I think now and then just step forward and say, actually, no, everyone, this is for me, and do it. You'll be surprised once you start training everyone that you're going to take some time for yourself. It's normal. It becomes part of the fabric of your life. And so I don't know if an 8-year-old would understand that as I was talking to her, but I'd say, just remember this. I'd put it in an envelope and say, take this out when you're 33 and you've got 3 children or something. Take this out and read this. Take some time just for you. Yeah.
I think that it's terrific advice, and also the inspiration of your story, Fiona, of, as you said at the top of the interview, you know, your midlife crisis at an early age of going, no, okay, I want to make my stamp, and subsequently 40 books already is a fantastic inspiration to anybody, let alone women, obviously. Before I let you go, for our listeners, all of the details of where to get your book and contact details are below where our listeners are listening to this podcast now. But could you just let us know on your masterclasses, because I'm sure that has piqued quite a few people's interest. How can they contact you or find out more about that?
Oh, simple. They can go to my website, which is www.fionamcintosh.com, and they can drop me an email, or they can go to the masterclass website and have a rummage around there, and then just contact me. I answer all my own emails. So any questions, any ideas, what should I be doing? I will answer them myself always. And yeah, I'll put them on the right pathway, whether it's me saying, maybe you're not ready yet, or maybe don't be frightened. I love beginners. I do love beginners because they're sponges and they're eager and they soak it all up. And, you know, so if I can catch someone nice and early, even if they're 50 years old, if I can catch them before they write 10 books and get disheartened, I'm thrilled to do that for them.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure you're going to get your inbox is going to get full very quickly now.
Good.
Especially.
Very good.
Fiona McIntosh, your latest book is The Spy's Wife. You're an internationally best-selling author. The Spy's Wife is another great example of your brilliant work. It's a fantastic book. Congratulations, and we wish you all the future success for the books that are currently in train, and as well as The Spy's Wife, which is now available at all good bookstores, as well as just goes to all of the details below this app. But Fiona, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, Jaynie, thank you to you and all your members. Have a good summer, everybody. Thank you. Happy reading.
Fantastic. Thank you. And if you've enjoyed listening to this, another episode of Sheroes Unlimited behind the book, as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you, well, then you can't ever miss out on any of these episodes. All you have to do is go to SheroesUnlimited.com and go to our podcast section. Make sure that you subscribe there, and you'll always be the first to get all of our podcasts that come through. Now, with this particular one, with Fiona McIntosh, if you liked it, like it. Share it, spread the love. We want everyone to know about The Spy's Wife. It's a magnificent book. And as I mentioned before, all of the details on where you can get this book and how you can contact Fiona are all below where you're listening to this podcast right now. And Fiona's book, The Spy's Wife, as well as a couple of the other books that she's already written, are all available in our shop at SheroesUnlimited.com. So take some time, make yourself a cup of tea, but you're going to need more than a cup of tea for this one, The Spy's Wife. life. But settle back and enjoy that story and all the others that have been written already by Fiona McIntosh. And until the next episode of Sheroes Unlimited Behind the Book podcast, I'm Jaynie Morris. It's been my absolute pleasure to have your company, and I look forward to you joining us again on the next episode, wherever you are in this amazing, beautiful world of ours. I hope you have an absolutely fabulous day.